Welcome back, my fellow travelers, to the Never Ending Adventure Podcast, the podcast where we talk about Adventure Time and how badass it is. I am your host of the show, DJ Netty P.
Partake of the fruit. Partake of the fruit. Netty P. Partake of the fruit.
It's my fruit, this nice little old fashioned that I'm drinking right now.
Partake of the fruit. My name is Russell Tyndall, and I'm the other co-host, and I don't actually talk like that, so I apologize for that entire intro. Hello, welcome to what Ned just said, the Never Ending Adventure Time Podcast. We're talking about Dad's Dungeon. Ned, wow. Cool episode. Season 3.
Great. Oh my
episode
gosh.
25. We're wrapping up here. We're getting toward the very end of this season. And it just feels like we flew through this one. I don't know why. It really feels like we came through season 3 way faster than season 1 and 2.
Yeah, I feel a little bit the same way too, except for the fact. So I looked back this one because we're wrapping up our season 3 next week technically, but today we're recording. But the first episode of season 3 is Conquest of Cuteness, and I was like, that feels like forever ago. You know, like that, like doing that one episode. But then at the same time, it's kind of like, oh my gosh, we have done a year and a half of this podcast, and it's flown. Like we're at the point finally when we started. I remember you being like, oh my gosh, there's 9 seasons of this show. How when are we going to get to the good stuff? And like,
this is episode 80.
Yeah, this is episode 80, which is awesome.
Of the podcast. Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, we're in some good stuff. This is a really good episode. Thinking back to Conquest of Cuteness, like, should not have been the first episode of season 3. I stick to what I said.
I think to that too.
The last episode of season 2, I fully believe should have been the first episode of the season.
Yeah, well, opinion. I think, so we're wrapping up, and we'll talk more about it next week, obviously. But they do, I think they auto kind of correct themselves, and they have a end of season 3 goes into season 4 with like a continuing episode.
Oh, that's great. I love that.
So yeah, it's not like the 2-parter they did at the end of season 2 with Mortal Folly and Mortal Recoil. So
yeah, you got me thinking about next week already. Let's stick to this week.
Stick to this one.
Yeah.
Dad's Dungeon. Let's just say this one like automatically has made it in my top 3 this season. Like automatically.
Is it because of the very sexy fruit witches?
A very sexy fruit. Well, I did have a great factoid, a little Nettie's factoid for you about the fruit witches. Is that they oddly look a lot like the in the first episode of Adventure Time Ever, Slumber Party Panic. The title card has like 3 sexy dancing ladies on it, and these are like pretty much those characters like put into an episode.
Okay. Wow.
So I thought that was a fun call. I think that had to have been purposeful, in my opinion.
It must have been. Like, I'm sure they go back and like, oh, we can use this for this situation that we're in right now. If you haven't picked up on it, listeners, travelers, the fruit witches are my sexy characters of this episode, without a doubt. They're amazing. That whole flower trap, which we'll get into in a little bit, is actually my tops of the episode.
Ooh, okay.
I loved that scene. That scene.
Wait, specifically the hallway deciding scene, or like the
when
actual
they're in with the fruit witches, just everything that occurs there. I mean, we can get into it. I just they're so distracted right now, like in that situation. We're really hopping forward in this episode, which might be a better episode to just go straight through, but. They're having this conversation about like Finn crying. He's really upset with, the things that Jake's been saying and the way that his father and the holograms has been talking about Finn. And Finn's basically saying like, what? I cry when people die. Like, what's wrong with that? Unfortunately, it's such a heavy conversation that they're so distracted the entire time that they're in this weird hallucinogenic-esque world where they're walking upon a large table and the fruit witches are flying around, like partake of the fruit. I mean, y'all have seen this episode, or if you haven't, you should go watch it because it's a good episode.
Don't go listening to our full podcast and being like, yeah, I've never seen this episode. I have no idea what they're talking about.
No, but it's a great one. And so I think the only reason like they don't get trapped by this is because they're so distracted with their own internal and external conflict that they're having between the two of them and their father, who is pre-recorded this entire episode.
Yeah. Oh, I've got things to say about that too. So.
Yeah, and then Jake forces one of the witches to eat the apple, and Finn's kind of giving up. He's like, "What's the point? Like, everybody around me is like, put me down. Like, I'll just hang out here and I'll eat the fruit." And Jake forces the apple. She swallows it, then she gets swallowed up by vines. I mean, it's just like so great. They go from the inside out. She turns into an apple. Then the other witches like destroy her, and you see her bones.
Yeah, consume her specifically.
Yeah. It's just such a good scene. I really loved that whole moment in this episode. It was fantastic.
And it was great too. It made that room just a little bit deeper than just like, oh, if you eat the apple, like you'll be poisoned and die, And they escape only because of the Jake's Wario fart that he does at the end of that. Just like makes his butt bigger
in their faces.
I know, I love it. I love it. But no, I've got. We'll take it back because you're definitely right in that sense. If we get kicking on one topic, we're not going to talk about like the other parts of this episode if we get too deep into one. So we start out again just chilling in the boat on the treehouse in this episode, which I love. They are doing beautiful, like just what you like in every episode, like the colors in the background. It's kind of like this cool sunset vibe.
I noticed it was like a different choice too for the sunset. Not to distract y'all, but it was an interesting color palette choice. I liked it.
Yeah, it was somewhere. It wasn't that kind of like yellowish dusk that they sometimes do. But it wasn't like just like the plain blue sky, which made it way more of a vibe. And I was like, dude, I could absolutely just vibe and just chilling with BMO in the boat on the treehouse.
You got a major cutie moment. Yeah, BMO's not my lovely in this episode, but a major cutie moment where he's just like, "What? Your head on my body isn't boring? It's weird." I love it.
I love this though because it introduces. We talk about our treehouse episodes where we learn more about like Finn and Jake's relationship with each other, specifically things that BMO does. And I like that this one, it just tosses that in there. Like when they're not adventuring, they're just like chilling out going like, hey, Jake, turn into fun shapes, turn into a cheetah farting, turn into a BMO body Finn head, which is
great.
It's great. And for all my fans out there, let's remember that moment from Islands when there's a BMO head on a sexy body. I'll leave it at that. I won't spoil anything. So,
and actually, at the end of this episode, Jake turns into the cheetah once again, I believe, as they enter the final cavern to take on.
I think he had to have had some sort of muscle memory on the cheetah now.
Yeah, maybe so. It's a good look. I like it.
Oh yeah, it's a good look. Well, we jump from that right into Sparkles. Let's squash the Sparkles. Which
are we really to believe that those are spirit sparkles, or I don't know? It just seems way too convenient.
Yeah, that was kind of, I guess, we just have to get. They could have maybe it would have been too long. Been like, oh, like we were cleaning out the treehouse and we found Dad's old tapes or something like that. But,
yeah, it's interesting to notice too that clearly the father knew of them living in this treehouse, so he passed away at some point after they moved in.
Yeah.
To the treehouse.
Yeah, that was I had that as a factoid of mine, is that he gives directions to the dungeon based on the treehouse. So they were living there before their parents passed away. I wish they really did give more answers on.
Do they not?
Well, they do more Joshua and Margaret like lore and some of the like history of Jake and Jerome and Finn and all that stuff, but they don't really get into like how or why they died. I guess because they wanted to not, make it morbid per se,
Okay. Yeah, he's an interesting character, that Joshua. First off, how they never noticed that 80 paces west of the treehouse, there's a dumb-looking rock that sticks out like a sore thumb. Probably should have been moved at some point, just for the sake of it, the annoyance of it making noises. I don't know, man. What's up with that?
Who knows what's in the grasslands that there could just be
80 paces though, dude. Yeah. That's not far. That's like, you gotta know your yard, man.
Like, would they ever have moved it? Like, would they ever have pushed it aside?
No reason to, I guess.
No reason
they very much Legend of Zelda, that one where they're just like whatever
they
the
said that it's
tone
very
is.
Legend of Zelda. It's just like dungeons are under rocks.
Yeah.
Let's say that though. The dumb looking rock is my lovely of this episode.
Is it really?
It is 100%.
That's great.
I just think that's like, I love that they just did that. It's just like, for all my fans out there, it reminds me of when the wizard that can bring things to life, and he like brings to life the Ice King's book, and it has like the stupid face on it. It reminds me of that. So I do think my theoretically speaking here is that the rock was touched by the wizard that brings things to life.
I like it. Well, we have the Spirit Sparkles talk, and the first hologram. Sorry, that's what I want to talk about. When Joshua is holding Finn and Jake and squeezes both of them, and then Jake kind of giggles, right? And Finn starts crying. And I guess in his mind, that is a moment of weakness for Finn. And he kind of bases this whole episode around he's being a bad father, obviously, for so he's just holding him, like flinging him around, squeezing him to make him cry or giggle or whatever. I mean, we're not all Pillsbury Doughboy, Jakes. So,
but Finn looks more like a Pillsbury Doughboy. That's for sure.
He does, just a little bit. But then I do love the family demon sword, or what is it? Yeah, it's made from demon's blood. I guess that's what it is. Yeah.
Yeah,
that's pretty sweet. That's got to come back, right? I hope.
Yeah. We've got an episode coming up. I think it's season 4. That's actually about the demon himself.
Okay, nice.
And they have like an interaction in a whole episode about that demon trying to get his blood back.
That's great.
But I know we can't do it yet. And a lot of people, they'll do like ranking of all the Adventure Time swords. And I know Demon Blood Sword always makes people's like top 3, like pretty consistently.
Dude, that demon, he brings up some questions I have about Joshua. I mean, first off, that whole scene really calls into question. And this whole episode calls into question Joshua's parenting techniques and the influence that he probably had on Finn, a very young Finn, and shaping who he becomes, whether that's a positive one or a negative one. He's my most punchable character, if he's not yours.
I would say Joshua from the get-go is pretty much most punchable in this episode.
But it shows he's got incantations, right, that he can do, because he casts one in order to make the demon go away. But also the demon's like, hey man, we go way back. Like at the very end of the episode, when he thinks he's talking to Joshua, but he's actually talking to Finn and Jake, and they use the recording to get rid of him by using the incantation that he used in the recording.
Yeah, which is Ki Oth Rama Pancake is the incantation. Which I love. Another one of my factoids is that in the City of Thieves, when there's actually a wizard that goes, pancake, 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 and then turns into a cat. And so they're like, oh, maybe that there is a possible like pancake could be a magic word, like a magic incantation word.
I love it. The Nettie's factoids of this episode are just sprinkled on like Parmesan cheese throughout this episode.
I love not having to force a factoid segment in that, how like we can organically be like, oh yeah, that's actually really cool.
Yeah, I like that too. But it's interesting. He threatens to cut off their love handles, which I'm kind of like about that. Like, can we get that demon?
Can I get that demon for myself?
I got
my love handles.
Some minor love handles I wouldn't mind getting rid of. The little bee belly. But it just makes me think Joshua's sus, man. He's just super sus. My big thing that I wanted to say about Joshua for this episode, to summarize everything, we'll get into the rest of this episode, but essentially he's like using Finn's insecurities to put him down throughout this entire episode. And I think in his mind, he hopes that it's going to toughen up Finn, but that's just, I'm not a parent, but like, that's not a great way to parent, man. Like it doesn't sound appropriate in my opinion, and probably not a great way, or it's probably a great way to strengthen their insecurities that they already have, whatever that may be in your child. And likely have a negative effect on them later in their life, as we see it affecting Finn. He just has
100%.
I don't know. He's just so like sad or bummed out.
Yeah. I mean,
what could be a silly diss, but like it's his dad.
It's his dad.
And then his brother.
I've got a lot to say about this, and this is kind of all of my deep thoughts and all of my lessons will stem from this. So I don't want to knock it all out and just spill it all at once. But Yeah, the big thing there's positive reinforcement and there's negative reinforcement. And a lot of the studies, I guess, done on it is with like, you get a cookie versus you get, slapped on the butt, and this one I think is very like emotional positive reinforcement or emotional negative reinforcement. And I get that. I think Adventure Time itself is, like we've talked about, is either a lack of parenting is a big theme through the whole show, or bad parenting is a theme through the whole show. And so this one, I think they're really going on. It's actually like a commonality, and I would say makes Joshua more relatable of a father being like, I've got 2 babies and one cries all the time. I don't know what to do besides say, hey, Finn's a little whiny baby. And you remember they I think they even made fun of in Boom Boom Mountain when they were like, we found this tiny baby and all he was doing was crying because he was
just get your boom boom baby.
You just get your boom boom baby. So like, they love Finn.
All
obviously, right. Joshua wouldn't gone through the trouble.
I don't know, man.
Well, he wouldn't have gone through the trouble to make a whole dungeon for him, like a very like intricate dungeon too.
But even in the first hologram message talking about the dungeon, he's like, Finn, this dungeon is going to kick your tail. I bet you won't even make it through the first trap. Like he's expecting him to fail. And I think all of these messages are written in the thought, like as if he makes it through, right? Like the condition was, you get my love, you get, I'm proud of you.
Like it was a conditional
you make it
love
to the
thing.
End. Yeah, if you make it to the end of this dungeon and make it to the final tape and get to hear this final tape, like, I'm so proud of you. You're going to do great things, son. Like, way to go. You finished the dungeon, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, and you got to think, though, he's their adopted son. So there's probably a little bit less of a factor of like an unconditional love for Finn,
I don't know.
Just because it's not that whole blood. And we'll go on to the Jake thing later, too. But
it's hard to say about the adopted child thing, right? Because neither one of us have ever done that. And I don't like to think that anyone who adopts a child doesn't love that child unconditionally.
Oh, no. That's not what I'm saying.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not like saying that that's an overarching theme or anything, but with the show specifically, I really can't spoil stuff about Jake and everything, but it's just very interesting that plays a factor. And he's, like I said, I think the love is there. It's just done in a way. Obviously, when he's a brand new parent, they're like little babies, and he's like, this is definitely something that's going to help him one day. And this is even before Finn would have been an adventurer. Who knows? Finn could have been anything. He could have just been a gardener. And then if Joshua was like, go slay these,
but it seems like Joshua's
demons.
coming off like, you got to be an adventurer. Like he wants his kids to be, which he's kind of projecting what he wants on them and forcing them down the path that he thinks. I mean, fortunately, Finn and Jake love adventuring, and that's where their deep passion is. But that
wasn't a given when they were babies.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just questionable parenting, in my opinion, all the way through. With Joshua.
Which is why I do love the end of this episode. Like, don't get me wrong, but the end of this episode, I wish they would have said, they were like, man, Dad's awesome. And I was like, oh, I wish y'all had a little moment where you were like, have you seen the movie Onward, that Disney Pixar movie?
I have not.
Okay. Dude, first of all, it's like my top 2 favorite Pixar or Disney movies.
Well, okay.
So
is this your rec for this week?
Yeah, honestly, because this episode reminds me of that so much.
Sure. Okay.
And so Onward, it's like it's very D&D inspired, which is why I think you would love it anyway. But the end of the movie, it's like the whole time the main character is trying to become a wizard so he can spend time with his dad for 24 hours with a spell. And he realizes at the end that his dad, like, he can't spend it, but his older. I'm going to go off. It's going to be way too convoluted to try to cram into one thing.
We don't tangent on this show.
We don't tangent on this show. But at the end of the day.
Never mind. I was going to go in the commercials.
But we do need to take a break because I have a lot to say. I have a lot to say. Well, we do need to breathe a little. Let you guys take a break. Go get some nachos, take a poop, whatever you need to do. y'all looking for something to do this holiday season? You tired of all those boring parades, gatherings, waiting in line, roller coasters? Yeah, that sounds pretty lame to me. So this season, why don't y'all take your stupid little family down to stupid Rock City, Tennessee? We got the best stupid rocks, rock sillies, butt boulders, poop pebbles, and even the world's largest dumbass diamond. So please, take your family somewhere where they would really remember this year. No, seriously, we haven't had a visitor in 15 years. We really need some money. So please, please, please come give us your money at Stupid Rock City, Tennessee, the world's best location.
Welcome back. No butts. This is a great podcast. Transition back into it after a commercial for a advertisement that we actually weren't sponsored by. So, they weren't actually sponsored. But Rock City, Tennessee, I don't know if you're in town sometime. Go there. What's up? Ned? No butts. Butts are for pooping. We're getting into the dungeon. Let's go talk about burgers and hot dogs. I think this is, again, another situation where I'm like, obviously an incantation, right? This has to be something that Joshua put, like some sort of a spell where it's like a food monster that occurs based off of what they want to eat in order to test them.
And, the cravings creature?
Yeah, some sort of a cravings creature that he created, which I want to know more about Joshua's abilities. Like, I want to know more about like how powerful Joshua is and how he's able to even just like capture a giant monster and bring it into, because not only did he have, I know he got at the very end, the last hologram, or not the last, second last hologram, the two fingers come up out of that last room and grab him. But in order to get that monster into that room, he had to really dominate that monster in some way.
Or he found the monster and built the dungeon around it.
Maybe so. But he definitely says that he's putting... I think he says that he put the monster in there.
Well, I'll give you a little spoiler drop. So Joshua and Margaret had a business called Joshua and Margaret Investigations. And so essentially what they were is they were like a service for the land of Oo, where they would just get requests in to investigate paranormal or weird things happening. And so they were kind of like Finn and Jake, a little bit more on like the private investigator side of things, a little bit more than like the knights and adventurers. And so that is where they have all these things, they have all these like kind of abilities that they essentially they learn along the way. So with a lot of stuff, they'd be like, hey, there's this demon that's terrorizing our village. And so I think Joshua would go do research and figure out, like, learn incantations on how to beat all of the things that they were like called to do. And so over time, they just become these like awesome, like they just have all like, and we'll actually get to it with an episode with Jerome, who's like the keeper of their parents' house, which has all these like demons and lore and, relics and things like that. So that's a spoiler, but that can probably answer and clear up a lot of things about them.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. So he definitely has some abilities, some powers or whatever. I mean,
oh yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, a useful person to have around, perhaps, if you're adventuring. But, that second tape after the burgers and hot dogs is the moment where he basically tells, the entire time they're like, Finn, cover your ears, like, you can't hear this. And it actually leads to a couple of great slap moments. I don't know if you caught that throughout the episode. There were 3 really fantastic slaps.
No, I didn't. Not that I called out on purpose.
Yeah, I don't know why it stuck out to me. The first one is when, Jake slaps Finn to get him to take his hands off of his head after, I guess, the first recording. Then the second one is Finn slaps Jake when he goes to eat the hot dog after they escape from that room. And then the last one is the monster in the final room slaps Finn as like his first like way to attack him. Yeah. And I don't know, the way that those hit in those moments were just so fun to me.
They really accentuated the open palmness, I guess, is why it's noticeable.
I think so. But anyway, so the second tape is the one where, I can't talk today. This is bad. We're going to record two episodes of this podcast when Jake is told to go and call Finn a whiny baby. This is like that moment, right? Right before the flower trap and the gooey gross dude, which is an interesting comparison even, where the way that they handle that gross gooey dude and Finn's like, cheer up. Like, we're only calling you gross because we're your bros. And then he digs even deeper into saying, like, take a bath. Like, bros, like, call each other out and, like, are real with each other. And then it's very like next the same moment,
thing I've always thought about that. You know, it's like, people are embarrassed, like when your fly's down, when you've got something between your teeth or something. But like your best friends are the ones that go, hey man, your fly's down. I'm not trying to like
but
rip
not
on
in
you,
front
but
of other
like,
people.
Yeah, but be
Don't
like,
do
hey man, I
would
want somebody to tell me if mine fly was down. And so like your buddies are going to be like, hey, zip your fly up, bro. And like this guy's just like, you stink, take a bath. And he takes it well. He's like, hey, thanks guys. And it makes me wonder why they didn't actually take that path, because that guy, he was just like bros with him now.
He probably would have let him go by. Yeah. I wonder where that path would have led to. Probably the same place, I'm guessing.
Yeah. Well, there is
one or two paths.
Because of the pre-recorded holograms, and Joshua mentions that they were in like the flower room or whatever. If they are truly pre-recorded, then it'll be like, how did Joshua know that they went down that path? Unless that path
you
went
had
nowhere.
to. Yeah, you had to go down that path, perhaps. That's interesting. But yeah, it's just so fascinating because right after that, Jake is very not real with Finn, you know, and that's when he calls him out, calls him a whiny baby. And you have all, as we already talked about, the partaking of the fruit, sexy witches, you know, and that's just such an interesting moment where it's like, Finn's like, oh, dude, we're bros. Like, we'll tell you if you stink, it's all good. But Jake won't do that initially for him until he's just it finally breaks him. He's just like, no, like, Dad's just saying this in order to try and toughen you up. Like, you are tough. He does love you at the very end with the remix kind of beatboxing recording that Jake plays for Finn.
It leads me to part of the sexy witch's apple room and the final demon as well. It leads me to my deep thought, kind of the continuing tangent from the Onward movie, is that Jake starts to realize himself that what his dad's doing is not working, and that Jake then takes back into his own hands. First of all, he slaps the apple out of Finn's hand, which is kind of the direct, like, Joshua didn't want Jake intervening with Finn's dungeon adventure. He wanted him to just pretty much just tell him, hey, you're a crybaby, just keep going. But that Jake takes into his own hands and protects Finn, gets him out of there, toots on the witches, encourages him at the end, and then essentially makes the final decision to play the tape before he's finished the dungeon. And so Jake has this moment where he goes, I can essentially teach Finn this lesson and get Finn through this dungeon better than my dad can. And I think that that's a really big concept of the show, is that Finn and Jake are bros, but in a lot of ways, Jake is kind of this father figure to Finn.
And he even calls himself kind of an uncle occasionally, you know?
Yeah, and then, the next episode, he calls himself Uncle Jakey.
And I think we've heard that in a previous episode as well, and I never called it out because I thought, oh, that's an interesting thing. But perhaps that's when he feels as though he is big brothering or fathering, you know, Finn a little bit, is when he's being Uncle Jake.
And it's a fine line, and we see it a lot through the rest of the show, where Jake walks this fine line of, you know, he's my bro, like, we want to go do bro things together, and hey, I need to be a good example for Finn, and I need to protect him, and I need to make sure he's learning how to handle, and it way more comes up with lady issues. Like, Jake is like not good with lady issues himself, but he's like, hey, I need to be the one that teaches Finn this stuff.
And it's not always for the best, but he tries.
No, but that's kind of, and that's like my deep thought of this episode. And, you know, you have to take those like life circumstances and be like, yeah, like I could just like let Finn do whatever, or not protect him, or not teach him anything, because it's not my responsibility, but I'm taking that on because I love him, you know?
Yeah, that's great, man. It's, you know, I love even the references in this episode are really good. And in that final hologram, before they go into the cavern, Joshua calls Finn Sue. And do you know what that's a reference to?
Yes,
or did you have to read about it?
The Boy Named Sue song.
Okay. Yeah. I wasn't sure if you actually knew that song or not. It's great. In case you don't know, it's a Johnny Cash reference. And I had to assume it was. Did they actually state that it is, or does the wiki state that it is?
Yeah, the wiki was like, yeah, I'm pretty sure that it's a call out to the boy named Sue, Johnny Cash.
Yeah. So in case you don't know, I'll just read a couple lines from that. Like toward the end of the song, here's some lyrics that I just think are really great. And it kind of talks, it's a weird perspective on fathering that the father in the song, A Boy Named Sue, takes and uses on his own son. And he said, son, this world is rough. And if, and a man's got to, geez, again, that's crazy, dude. And he said, son, this world is rough. And if a man's going to make it, he's got to be tough. And I know I wouldn't be there to help you along. So I gave you that name and I say goodbye. And I knew you'd have to be tough or you'd die. It's that name that helped you make it, helped make you strong. So it's kind of just an interesting perspective on like, I'm going to screw you over, but in order to, like, when I do so, you're going to come out on the other side of this much better, which I just don't agree with. But
no, I don't either.
It's a great song, though. It is a really good song.
Yeah. I mean, this didn't
totally
work.
Botched the lyrics.
Whatever Joshua does, he assumes is going to work, and it only works because of Jake. But
yeah. Well, he finally gets his father's approval, and he turns it around from being getting whooped by that giant monster, which really cool design of that giant Cyclops monster.
Dude, between the big monster and the almost Lub Glub looking like head brain demons on the sexy ladies, like,
oh yeah,
this is an episode for sure they pushed the boundaries. Like if we look at the differences between the first dungeon episode we had, even though it had that like creepy angel demon that puts Jake in the stew or whatever, this one I'm like, oh my gosh, this is like creepy rough. Like this gets like Courage the Cowardly Dog creepy.
It does for a couple of moments, especially with, like you're saying, with the fruit witches. And then toward the end here, though, probably the coolest moment of this episode is when Finn has the sword stabbed straight into the monster's eye. Mm-hmm. And it just, the light of the eye is shining on him, and he lifts him up and tosses him into the hole. And it really feels like a big heroic moment where it's just like, dude, takes the sword out of the stone too, rips the chain, doesn't even use the key, which is on the monster's hand or arm.
Yeah.
It's really cool.
Yeah. It's super cool that Finn uses the sword, and I think Joshua expected him to defeat the monster and get the key. And then the sword was like the reward of it all.
Yeah, totally.
But I was like, I just thought that, for sure gets my tops of the episode. It's kind of like right when Jake starts his like beatbox remix of the hologram tapes. And then just the artwork of that fight is so good. And it like flicks Finn on its hand and he's like flying through the air and it has that beam of light epic moment. It's just like, that's so good.
Fantastic. Man. Yeah. Finn's my lovely of this episode. I think he deserves it.
He does.
He went through a lot of emotional manipulation throughout this entire episode. I just started feeling bad for him. And, he clearly didn't have the best upbringing or perhaps the most normal upbringing. And he's such a crying, whiny baby, that Finn. But he finished the dungeon, so I'm proud of him, just like his father. I'm proud of him.
It was fun. Actually, when we get into next week's episode, I know the writers in the show actually have a lot of moments where they said, like, I don't know, we don't like to make Finn cry. We don't want.
Oh, interesting.
There was a lot of reservations from the writers, apparently, that I'm learning about right now, that they were like, Finn needs to be this, and they make him a little bit more vulnerable as the show goes on. But this one specifically shows Finn's soft spot. Like the show's very, very much that he is, I'd say, more emotionally driven than by like if he lost to a monster or like lost to a bad guy, that's like he can get over that. It's a lot of when he says, I only cry when people die, Yeah. And now we see that his loved ones like Joshua, that's something that hits his soft spot. And that he can really do anything, but his major weaknesses are people he loves, and whether they die, whether they betray him, whether they give him very bad parenting advice.
Yeah,
that's where his soft spot is. I don't know, man. I was a little surprised. Not to say that, like, yeah, negative reinforcement like that is bad, but he definitely pulls like a Luke Skywalker in the Last Jedi movie where he's like, oh man, like I really suck, and so I just give up, and it almost doesn't fit his character well. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I agree. I don't know. I don't think I'll get a better understanding of Finn's full character as we get further into this episode or this podcast and the episodes of the show. But it does seem a little off character to me as well.
I was
and next
very
episode
surprised
does too. Honestly, it's kind of annoying when he is crying over something small. I don't know. Maybe it's the teenager in him though.
Yeah, the next episode we're going into like PB and back into that relationship, which season 3 they didn't talk about. Well, we'll talk about that later.
We'll talk about that next episode.
But it is surprising, I'd say it's less surprising in this one because we haven't seen a lot of like what Joshua and Finn's lack of parents, adopted parents, how that affects him as an adult. And now we see it is that like maybe he's like a big driving force in him as kind of the outsider of that family is I really want my dad to be proud of me. And so that's obviously hits some sort of soft spot in him that we've never seen before, but it comes out of nowhere. It's a little surprising, a lot to take in at once,
Yeah, and it's interesting to see a different like way of being motivated through Finn as well, because most of the time it's like Finn is fighting for his friends or like for friendship is his big motivator in this show, and especially like his relationship with Jake to save Jake or Jake is encouraging
there's like an end goal
something.
Type thing. And it involves others usually.
Yeah, no, this was a really cool episode, man. I really liked this one. I thought it was interesting to bring Joshua back and to have him back in that way to play this role where he's almost antagonizing, or an antagonist is what I was going to say.
Yeah, he's pretty much the antagonist, but antagonizing Finn the whole time too.
Certainly,
good wordplay there.
It's not my favorite the way he goes about it, but it's a cool episode.
Oh no, it's a great. Well, again, this episode was named Dungeon originally, and before they turned it into Dad's Dungeon, and they were going to use just the title Dungeon to refer back to the one from season 1. That's again, I think, still top 5 episodes of the show so far for us.
Yeah.
But has that whole thing, you slide down in the dungeon, trial number 1, trial number 2. One is more of a physical trial, then one is a mental trial, and then and then there's the big epic villain at the end.
Which Finn destroys trial number 1 by himself, despite Jake trying to stop him and to eat the hot dogs. Finn just totally dominates that first trial, like no sweat even.
Well, we learn
until later on that
his body is a callus, so he can't be hurt.
Well, I know, which is a great moment, but it is interesting to think like he only starts to falter with these challenges when his loved ones are mentally blocking him, right? It's like he would have been fine probably with this entire dungeon, though I do wonder how he would have been able to handle if he had not been distracted the sexy fruit witches. I do wonder if that would have been
no. That's the fruit
He's a teenage
witches
boy. Sexy witches? Come on.
I think they're ignoring the witches, not just because they're in deep conversation, but I really do think it's like it's so obvious. Like they know like about like sirens.
Been here,
like,
done that.
Eat the fruit. Oh, eat the food. It's so like they're almost ignoring them because they're like, this is too easy of a challenge. Like,
okay,
that's what my thought was.
No, you're probably right. And I think we've already had a monster, like we've already had sirens on the show. I just can't think of where they are in the past anyways. So
yeah, the angel in the last dungeon episode was kind of like that
of course.
Too. So
yeah, it totally was.
Like, I'm here to save you. And then I'm going to eat your brains. I was going to ask though. So after dungeon episode number 2,
okay,
like how are we feeling about like Finn, like maybe we've already talked about this, but just in general with you, or like about Finn's adventuring and style, and now we know about his emotional stuff. Like, and it's kind of, this is a season 3. We're starting to wrap up season 3.
Yeah.
Like, do you feel like you relate with Finn more, and that he's becoming more like humanized, like we would be, or do you still think he's like, man, he's like a more epic than we are? Like,
he's a little more epic than we are, certainly. I think I'm just conflict adverse, so it's hard for me to relate to Finn when it comes to like fighting things and adventuring in that sort of way, which of course is unrealistic for the real world to some degrees. I mean, unless you're just drawing parallels with challenges that you come across in your day to day, which that certainly could be relatable. But in a very physical, like very literal sense, I don't relate with him in his adventuring as much as I wish I could. I'm not the hero, right? Like, in my opinion, or the main character per se, like in my opinion, there are aspects of my life that I feel the main character about. And I think it's a healthy, like,
yeah, you definitely need to feel that way. In some aspects of your life,
some sort of a healthy humbleness, but I don't know, even saying that sounds unhumble, but
yeah, but not, but
not
I know
like
you
Finn.
too.
Like Finn
not
is like
as much
the main
of a
character, right? I don't know.
Yeah. And what you're really saying is like this episode for sure shows his like caution to the wind, like mentality when it comes to adventuring and killing things. I know you're definitely more of like a methodical, like, let's think about this, and I think Finn will grow into that for sure. Yeah. And you'll like that development of Finn, because I think that will then push him in his growth, being like, oh, I get, like, he's just like gung-ho in season 1, starts to show like emotional responses in season 2, and now in season 3 you can be like, okay, now we are starting to see the soft spots.
It's interesting how this is a really good episode, and yet it still leaves me wishing that it led to a bigger storyline within all of Adventure Time. We got some with the father, and we've been wanting that with Joshua, but I don't think we're really leading anywhere with this episode. And kind of, I don't know, maybe the next episode we are leading somewhere, so I don't want to say anything about next episode.
The next episode we're introducing a new canonical character that's big.
Yeah. And I think
this one I think is well, it definitely has, like, you have to have seen this episode to get several other episodes, and a lot of the Joshua and Margaret investigations and the dynamic of that side of their family. You could go back to this episode after those future ones and be like, okay, it makes more sense. It makes more sense why Joshua's like kind of an asshole. It makes more sense why, understanding that family dynamic more kind of opens this episode up with several more layers.
Yeah. Well, dude, what's your lesson? Have you already said your lesson for this episode?
No, I mean, I've got a couple of them. I think we didn't really get into it. If you want to get into it, that I do think that part of these little like pre-recorded things have some sort of creepy AI aspect to it, where, because Joshua like responds very much as if they're actually talking to him.
Okay.
I don't know.
Yeah,
I had a lesson around that. So yeah,
it's definitely technology from a prior time, right? It's for sure technology from pre-war. I would assume. Yeah.
Well, my theory on that, because this is a good like little tangent to go down here too. It's just my theory about that is that these holograms they're recording are not just like video messages, that there is some aspect of Joshua and Margaret that has put their personality into it.
Okay, cool.
So it can respond as if it's like a artificial intelligent.
Yeah, because he calls Jake out being like, hey, like, obviously this is a pre-recorded message. I can't hear what you're saying. Like, shut up, dude.
Yeah, but then other moments of it make you not feel that way. So I think there's something sneaky.
But I think that is sneaky in the fact that he even knew that Jake was responding in a certain way, or he was predicting his son's patterns.
We've seen one with Margaret in the like weird virtual manifestation. So I think that this is something that they've got some sort of like weird AI spell on. So That's why it leads to my lesson that AI conversations with dead people is a bit of a gray area.
Okay, there you go.
The second is positive reinforcement always trumps negative reinforcement, although it is trickier to do that. The negative reinforcement is very surface level. Finn, don't be a baby. And I'm giving you this trial, but working on that development in a positive way is better.
Mm-hmm.
And then my last one is, you don't let others get you down. Like, remember that those who truly love you are going to support you and bolster you up. So when you get that negativeness in your life, that's you just got to be able to work and practice and fail and everything at drowning that out and being like, I know I'm badass. I know I can beat this dungeon.
Try and separate yourself from it almost.
Yeah, separate yourself from negative feedback from others, even when they're loved ones.
It's hard to take it, or hard not to take it personally, certainly.
It is. I learned that about myself all the time. And doing stuff with my family and being like, I know me. And if anything that goes on with family, brings me down, be like, it's hard to separate yourself from that, So that's my lesson. I won't get too deep on that. Maybe at a later date.
Well, my lesson's totally different, which is kind of neat that we had separate thoughts at the end of this episode. But mine is simply be real to your homies and be kind to those that you have influence over, which kind of harking back to the gooey, gross, large guy who probably needs to shower.
Yeah. No, that's good. I think I wouldn't have drawn the parallel between those two things about them being nice to that guy and giving him positive reinforcement and being like, we're just being nice. Go shower, change yourself. Yeah. Don't be a whiny baby.
And bros are real with each other.
Yeah. And Joshua is not real with them.
But to each other, not in front of other people, because that is super rude.
Super rude.
Do we have a Traveler's Log segment this week?
We do have a Traveler's Log. You guys have finally made it. We've talked about it for weeks now. This one comes from Olivia. First of all, she was super pumped and was hoping that the sticker giveaway was still going on, which it is. So leave us a review, Apple Podcasts, wherever you can leave us a review. Russell has finally picked up on my Slack, and I think he did send out some stickers this week. So very much appreciated.
You should be fully caught up. If you have asked for one and you didn't get it in the next week or week and a half, just reach back out to us.
Yes, but that was Olivia's first note on the log. The second note is that she said, I just wanted to say that you guys have some good ideas and insight when it comes to lessons and deeper meaning with the show, and I love it. You've inspired me to go through with my Adventure Time tattoo idea, and I'm so happy with how it turned out. Russell should be next, but no pressure. Russell coming for me. I'm going to give you a little pressure. She said the whole tattoo session, I was saying how lovely this would be and how not so lovely it felt, but I was so happy to have you guys in my ear the whole time. So that's super awesome. Olivia, I got a tattoo this week as well. So
what'd you get?
Shh, I can't tell you.
You can't tell me.
I'll show you the next episode. We're not going to get into that.
Okay, big reveal
time. But Olivia, thank you for writing in. That's super awesome. I'm going to get Russell to get a BMO tattoo for sure. So I'm glad that now we are inspiring others to do so. So maybe he'll feel a larger obligation.
Oh gosh. I did not tell anyone to get a tattoo. I've not forced that upon anyone. If you get a Never Ending Adventure tattoo because you love this podcast for some reason, don't tell us. I don't want to know.
I don't know.
That's too real. That's way too real.
That's too well. Or we'll have to, fly you down to Nashville and take you out for a beer or something like that. Fly you down to Nashville.
No, don't force that on anyone. We'll shout you out on social media without a doubt, but don't, this is a fun thing we do. Anyways, thank y'all so much for listening and hanging out for 80 episodes of Never Ending Adventure.
Oh gosh, that makes me think we'll be almost wrapped up with season 4 when we do episode 100, which is crazy.
Really cool.
Or about, halfway through season 4.
If you're still here and 80 episodes in and you haven't followed us on Instagram yet, you can follow us at Never Ending Adventure Podcast. Please do. It helps, and especially people that are engaged and hanging out with us. TikTok at Never Ending Adventure Cast. Twitter at NEA_podcast. Email us your thoughts, your opinions, your tattoos, like why you got it. If you listen to the podcast and you enjoy it, NEA.travelersvlog@gmail.com. Check us out. Follow us on YouTube just for the sake of helping us out some. And again, if you do a review on Apple Music, if you have an iPhone or iTunes, or even just rate us on Spotify, let us know you did, and we will send you a sticker and all of our love as well. And until next Tuesday, I've been Russell Tyndall. My co-host has been Ned Pruitt. Your producer, your best friend, secretly, has been DJ Cowboy Hat, also known as Michael Hitchcock. And party forever.
Party forever, because I love you guys so much.